Hey, so I had did a recording on the bulls the last time, and so I was thinking about horses and the experiences that I've had with horses. When I was a little girl, we lived out in the country, and we had a pony. We had a horse the first time. She didn't like me. I was only 5 years old, and she lived in our garage in a stable. And every time I would go in there, she would reach over and nip me on the stomach if she could. I could not stand that thing. She didn't like me either. So her name was Blondie. And then we moved to a really big piece of land and we had a barn, really nice old wood barn. And a pony came with the property. He had been a circus pony and these people had rescued him. So he went along with the house. And his name was Jed, and my dad would put me on him and lead me around. I remember he hadn't been ridden for a while, and dad put me on him, and Jed started to buck. And I remember my dad, it seemed like he grabbed me by one arm, didn't hurt me or anything, but before I knew it, dad had me by the arm, flying me through the air, putting me on the ground, and he jumped on Jed's back. And then another time, one of my cousins, he's passed on now, unfortunately, but one of my cousins took me out there and put me on his back and walked me around. And Jed sneezed and shimmied, and when he shimmied, I wasn't on a saddle or anything. So when he shimmied, I fell right off. And then I rolled real fast because he picked up his foot and stomped it on the ground. And if I would have stayed where I was, he would have stomped me. I've had lots of experiences. I had some cousins that lived not far from us, and I used to love to go to my uncle and aunt's house and ride horses. They still have horses, but I don't think they have as many. But it was so nice because I remember my whole family, like my mom and dad and my aunt and uncle, actually went riding before, and it was just so cool to be able to go there and ride horses. I remember. Um, we were out there right before I was pregnant with Michael, or right before I knew I was pregnant with Michael, and I was riding around, um, and I just loved going there. I loved them so much, and I loved being able to. It would be my uncle Tim and Aunt Debbie, and then they had my two cousins, Phil and Rusty. They took me. Riding one time we went, I didn't realize, I was bareback riding, and I mean, I could bareback ride or I could ride on the saddle, it didn't matter. But we went riding. My other uncle didn't live far from them on my other side of the family. It was my uncle Sonny and my aunt Wilma on there. So we went horseback riding. It was a little distance, but it still wasn't too bad, but we rode. And so I did not realize I'd never been past my uncle's house, but it was a dead end with a hill. And the boys were like, "Hey, you want to go up to the top of the hill?" And I'm like, "Sure, why not?" So we went up to the top of the hill, and it was a steep hill. And when we turned around, they said, "Hey, let's race." Okay. So the horses took off, and I just remember it was bouncing me so bad. I remember I'm like almost hanging sideways, holding onto the mane as tight as I could. And we ran those horses down the hill and into my uncle's driveway. And when we stopped, I fell off my horse. And I remember my one cousin started laughing. He couldn't control himself. And then he tried to pull himself together and, "Are you all right?" And I said, "Just my pride was hurt." That's what I told him. I said, "Just my pride. That's all." But so then many years later, well, going back to when we had Jed, and we lived out in the country, there was a lady who lived next to us she trained horses for a living, and she had a huge horse, and she would take me around on Jed also. And then I had a friend on the other side. Her name was Dawn, not my Dawn that um, I mean, it's funny because I think everywhere I've lived, I've had a close friend named Dawn. So it wasn't my Dawn friend that was like my best friend through most of my life that uh, passed away not that long ago. But this was another girl named Dawn, and she had horses, and she would bring her horses over and let me ride them. And there was girls that lived back behind that had horses, and they would bring them over, and I could ride them. So I got a lot of horseback riding when I was younger, and I just absolutely loved it. I love horses. So uh, go a lot years later. Um, my husband, grandpa, like I said, I'm leaving this for my kids and my grandkids, but if someone else gets to see them and enjoys them, that's awesome. But it would be Grandpa worked at a job where he was out. Um, it had like a barn, like a wedding venue. It was gorgeous. And I used to go to work with him. He worked overnight, and I used to go to work with him. And he had to drive around and keep checking on things. And there was a Clydesdale that we absolutely fell in love with. I mean, well, there was one that he fell in love with that was a little bit older, and then I fell in love with the other one. He was a little bit younger and he was bigger. He was just, um, but I remember we got to where like I would sneak him carrots or some apples or something, and he got used to it. And I would like put the bag of carrots in one of my pockets, or I might put a carrot or something in my pocket so that I had something left over because he was a little pig, and not a little pig, he was a big pig, and he would eat them up really fast. So I remember it got cute because he was used to the fact that I had extra on me. And so one day I had my coat on. It was wintertime. I had my coat on, and he starts hitting me with his nose on the different spots on my coat. And then he ended up hitting me on my pocket, my side pocket. And he heard the bag make the noise, and he started really nudging me hard with his nose, and I just got the biggest kick out of it. So I had to give him the other. There was times like he grabbed a hold of my zipper and was zipping it up and down. I just loved him so much. But one of the funnier things was your grandpa and I had went to go see him. He was like in a circle. His feet weren't that great, and they were trying to get him to heal up, and he was like in a separate kind of place where he was being held. And we were talking to him, and your grandpa had a walkie-talkie that he had to carry with him in case there was any issues or anything. And while we were talking to him, he reached down and grabbed a hold of your grandpa's walkie-talkie and flipped his head and flipped it into the middle of this circle. And your grandpa looked at me. He's like, "What do I do?" And I said, "Well," I said, "I guess I'm going to have to bring him over here to this side and keep him occupied while you run in and get that." He was so rotten. He was always trying to get the walkie-talkie, and he did that day. But it was just, I can't even tell you all the times that we just stopped and was rubbing on it. We would get to the fence and we would holler his name, and he would come running. And I mean, he was the biggest Clydesdale. He was huge. They used to use him for parades and stuff too, but it was just cool. I mean, I think that that's a really nice experience that I had, that I got to spend so much time with the horses and that, because to me, horses are just, they're amazing. All animals are amazing, really. But I just had to share that was my experience with cow. Or I shared my experience with cows last time, and so this time I thought I would share my experience with horses. And I'm sure there's many other stories that I can think of, but those are the ones that I'm putting on here now. And for my kids and my grandkids, I love you with all my heart. I hope that you get to see these. I hope that for my ones that I don't get to see very much, it helps you know me better. And I love you all, and I will see you next time.